we would be mistaken to think that God just, whenever we see a natural disaster or somebody gets sick, that God is there like throwing, sickness bolts, disease bolts down.
If pestilence is the name for a Canaanite deity, then would it be correct to say that the COVID-19, against the coronavirus, has also the same origin?
Good question. The short answer is no. If you look up all the places where the Hebrew terms are dever, ketev, and resheph. And incidentally, resheph is mentioned in one of those exorcistic texts that isn't Psalm 91. And then Psalm 91 gives you all three. These are, again, Canaanite deities. The Canaanites, the pagans, thought that natural disaster and things like plagues were the result of the work of, these gods. That, these things had their point of origin in individual entities, gods, demons, I guess we could call them, just for the sake of the discussion, even though that's a bit of a misnomer. But what the scriptures present to us is that no, if you go to Habakkuk 3, you go to Psalm 78, different passages like this, Habakkuk 3 is kind of important. You'll see that Ketev and Dever and Resheph are subservient to the God of Israel. They are lesser beings. They are not in command of nature. Only the God of Israel is in command of nature. Mm. So the Old Testament demythologizes these deities to that extent. It doesn't deny their existence, but it says, look, they don't have independent authority over nature and creation. They don't. Now God may, throw down a plague, like against Egypt. God may use a natural disaster as a judgment. But the point is that God is in control of all of these things. Now, someone could hear that and say, well, is COVID-19 a plague from God then? Is God just whipping it at people? And that takes us into, well, who's getting it? Who deserves it more? On my website, I blogged about Luke 15, where Jesus is asked, about like natural disasters, like there's a specific incident where actually there's human evil and then, this natural disaster stuff in Luke 13. And the people ask him like, hey, did these people die because they were more wicked than others?
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus' answer in both cases is no.
Mm-hmm.
Like just
right.
Flat out, no, you're not understanding correctly. And his ultimate point is, instead of wondering about why people die today, you ought to be worried about the second death. Okay, you ought to be worried about your eternal destiny. But to back up to the question, we would be mistaken to think that God just, whenever we see a natural disaster or somebody gets sick, that God is there like throwing, sickness bolts, disease bolts down. Because even in Genesis 1, we mistakenly think in Genesis 1 that all the world was Eden, and Eden is all the world. The world's perfect. It's the new creation. It's perfect. No, it isn't. Okay. In Genesis 1:31, God looks at what he has made and says it's very good. And then Genesis 2 has Eden as a specific little piece of that turf. Eden is a specific geography. So we can tell right away that Eden is not the world and the world is not Eden. Mm. That we're supposed, the humans are supposed to subdue the earth, okay, to bring it under restraint or maintain it and whatnot, and that those verbs are different than what they're doing in the garden. So there's a difference there, and very good is not perfect. Tamim is a different word in Hebrew that is not the word used in Genesis 1:31. So scholars look at this, and there's a whole bunch of creation cosmology passages all over the Old Testament, especially in the Psalms. And what you're supposed to get out of all of that material is that, look, the world was created very good. God's happy with it. It gets the approval. This is going to be a place for human habitation. But it is not perfect. It needs to be kept under restraint. It needs to be maintained. Humans need to understand and discover what makes it tick so that they can assist me in the process of bringing creation, bringing nature under control. And that suggests that at any point, and there could be points where chaos erupts, nature can be destructive, just by definition, by virtue of what it is. You know, if there was Genesis 1:32, like after God says it's very good, and if Adam would have been there and said, hey, I'm going to go live in the ocean for a while. No. It's going to kill you. Okay? It's going to kill you. Nature was never this thing that couldn't harm people, is the point. So there are lots of things that can harm people just by virtue of who we are and what nature is. So we should not draw the conclusion that when somebody gets sick, especially after the fall, when the earth becomes even more affected again by that, we should not draw the conclusion that God is out to get people, that he's out to get me, that this is a disease lightning bolt from God, and all this kind of stuff. That's poor thinking. Now, that is not to say that God can't use a natural disaster or couldn't be behind something. He can. It happens occasionally. The plagues on Egypt are the most obvious illustrations. But to say that everything is that is just a misreading of Scripture.